Hello, everyone. This is Shantae. And before this episode starts, I made a reference to my friend York Campbell and his podcast. And in this episode, I referenced it as the Poetic Earthlings podcast. But this podcast was recorded actually before he changed the name. And his podcast is actually titled Welcome to Earth Stories. So for those of you who want to hear a really cool podcast, make sure to check out Welcome to Earth Stories and enjoy this episode that we have here on episode 50 of the Call to Action podcast. You are listening to the Call to Action podcast, where we aim to inspire, educate, and inform entrepreneurs and self-starters on tech and tips related to navigating this ever-changing world. Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to episode 50 of the Call to Action podcast. I am your host, Shantae, and today we are having a fireside chat with Julee Balko, who is a freelance writer and a creative director and the author of the book titled The Things We Keep. Before I bring our guest onto the show, I have a positive mindset affirmation that I'd like to share with you all today. So here is the positive mindset affirmation for episode 50 of the Call to Action podcast. My heart possesses the courage to see big dreams. I'm going to say that one more time. I think that's something that we all can feel. My heart possesses the courage to see big dreams. I got that from planmindfully.com, and you can actually go there and purchase your very own set of printable positive mindset affirmation cards. And these are great for manifesting. They're good for your vision boards and also starting your day with some good energy. Visit planmindfully.com to learn more. If you missed episode 49 of the Call to Action podcast, as always, it is a must listen. My guest for that episode is Mickey Morency, and she was born in Haiti, and her family immigrated to the U.S. over 40 years ago. They settled in Boston, where Mickey graduated high school and college. Now, she recently won a contest, and her story appeared in Writer's Digest magazine, and her debut novel, The Island Sisters, will be published in 2023 by BHC Press. Take a listen to this clip from episode 49 of the Call to Action podcast. Trying to get settled into America and all that goes along with that.
In my book, I even touch on immigration. Shante, I have one of my characters. I mean, she came from Haiti, so she kind of like to depend on the mate on her husband because he was the one who was going to get her the papers to be legal. So all of these factors come into play.
Again, you can hear the full episode on ctamarketing.biz. When you're there, click on podcasts on the main menu to access that episode as well as past episodes. As mentioned in the intro, everyone, I have Julee Balko with me today. And Julee is a freelance writer, a creative director, and also the author of the book titled The Things We Keep. So everyone, please join me in welcoming Julee to the show today. So Julee, welcome to the Call to Action podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
That is awesome, Julee. Thank you for being here. Now, Julee, on my show, I have icebreakers. I like to break everyone in. And this is a great way for people to get to know you better. And they're also fun. So the icebreaker that we have for you today is for you to share with us what you have on your phone as your wallpaper.
Sure. And I should say I have 3 kids, but they are not my wallpaper. In fact, it is a tapir, which is a really large, strange animal from the Woodland Park Zoo in Seattle. And it happens to be my favorite animal. And you never see them because they're strange and weird. And I was so excited they had one at the zoo that he or she, I don't know what it is, it's my wallpaper, and I love it.
Okay, Julee, a tapir. I've never heard of a tapir. What is it furry? Like, what does it look like?
No, it's like black and white. It kind of looks like a pig and an anteater and a hippo. It has like a short little nose trunk, and that's just what makes me love it. It's ridiculous looking, but they're from like South and Central America.
Interesting. Interesting. All right. Well, cool. Well, thank you for sharing that because that's very interesting, Julie.
Spreading the
Never.
taper knowledge to the world around.
Yeah, and that's why we do icebreakers. I always learn something fun and crazy, and this is probably like the number one on my list so far. That has been like the most interesting.
Everyone say it's TAPIR. Type it in right now and take a look.
I have to check that out. Awesome. Thank you, Julie. All right, so Julie, now I want to learn more about your book. Let's just go right into it because you have a book and it's titled The Things We Keep. And it's kind of like a personal story, isn't it?
I mean, it is personal in a way because I started writing it after my mother had passed away. I read a lot of books and I kind of use them to understand my world around me. And when I went through grief, I was just shocked at how long it took me, how it felt, how lonely it was, how nobody talked about it. It was like you get 2 weeks and like people bring you dinner. And then after that, like nobody talks about this fact that you've just lost this like huge person in your life. And I thought one day I need to write a novel that uses grief as a theme. So that way anybody going through it doesn't feel alone. Anybody that hasn't gone through it can kind of get a heads up that, hey, it's not the easiest thing in the world. And it is kind of this long journey.
Wow, that's an interesting topic. And it's a sensitive topic, I would think, when you're talking about grief. I don't think I've ever read any books about that either, personally myself. But that's interesting. So you took it upon yourself. You say, I'm going to write this book. Um, And I'm sure that it's probably helped others that have probably gone through something like a major loss to have read your book and maybe used it for healing. Have you found that people who have read your book have come to you or maybe sent you emails or something just to say something about like thank you or something about your book and what it brought to them or what it gave them?
Yeah, and that's actually been the best part of the book. I've always wanted to be an author, and while it's wonderful to have a book, the best part has been the emails from readers. And I also have done some, book clubs where readers will just tell me these amazing stories, and that's it. How honest and like impactful the grief was for them. They were able to let go of some things that they were holding on because that was also like, I wanted the book not just to be an outlet for them to cry, but also to be able to give a little bit hope and give a little bit of insight into what we can kind of let go of as we walk forward. But yeah, I've gotten some amazing emails that have made me cry too, and felt so glad that I've set out to write kind of a difficult book, but one that can really be powerful for so many.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's really good. I think I like doing this show because I learn things from the guests that I have here on the show, but that just is another example of how we are all here on this journey on this planet together, but there's people that you don't even know that you have helped through your writing. And yeah, I think that's awesome. And this is just another example of how people are coming together and able to just help one another. And you can touch people, like in your example, with your book, with words and a story, and help them to get through things to the point where they're, writing you a letter saying thank you. I mean, that's amazing to me. And I think that's really, really good.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably the goal of every author is to touch a reader and to have so many different people, and they haven't all been about grief. Some have been about marriage. One of the important themes in my book is, that marriage is tough, but there's hope. And if you choose love, you can work through a lot of things. And I've actually heard from two readers that, they took a second chance at their marriage, that they were going to choose love and work harder and not give up. And that was pretty awesome. And then I've also heard from a lot of people, the mother-daughter relationship in this book is tough. And that was important for me to write a relationship that, isn't the, hey, let's go shopping mom kind of relationship, but is layered and complex and, sometimes a little mean. But the main character, Serena, kind of learns about her mother after the fact and is able to kind of let go of some things and to realize that in the end, there was always love, and that was a big theme in my book as well. So I had one woman write me who said she was carrying just a lot of anger for about 60 years towards her mother. And reading the book made her realize, you know what? They were very different, but there was love. and she was going to let it go. And that was another letter that was just amazing.
That's heavy, Julie.
Yeah, no,
Wow.
it's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Wow. No, that is awesome. Have you thought about counseling people? I mean, it sounds like you got something going on here.
How about I just keep writing books and hoping,
I don't know. You might have another gift sitting there somewhere, Julie. You're bringing out people's pains and they're dealing with it and they're like, healing from it. I think that's awesome.
I definitely went into this book with some major themes in mind. And yeah, I guess with that goal, right, of so many things that are from our past and complex relationships. And I knew I wanted to let them go too, as like a writer. So I think that kind of diffused in the book, and people can feel that.
Wow. That's cool. That's really cool. So as far as like when you first started writing, because you wrote this book, when did you publish this book?
I published it, actually, it came out last summer. So it's not even a year old. It's a baby book.
Oh, cool. Okay. So 2021. So when you were writing, or when you started writing, is this something that you just kind of hopped into? A lot of people, I'm going to ask you this because a lot of people, 2020, like freed up a lot of time for a lot of people, which I think was actually good, because people were able to tap into different talents that they probably didn't know that they have. And I've heard some people say that they started writing at that time, and there's just doing different things that they otherwise wouldn't have done or didn't know that they could do. So did you start writing this in 2020, or was this something that goes way back as far as just writing in general?
I thought of the idea after my mom passed. I had just my first daughter. And so I kind of thought of it and thought, well, I don't have time to write something. And then I had twins. And I joke that nothing makes you miss your mother more than when you have two babies at the same time. And I really missed my mother, and my grief came back really just in a strong way. And I thought I can either, have this affect me, or I can start writing and figuring it out and bringing the story to life, and also like using it just for me. So I started writing it with three kids that were very, very young. And it took me a long time because I'd write during nap time and, when I could. So it took me really about 6 years to write. But I edited it in 2020. And that was really a hard year for me because, I wrote the book after my mom passed, but I wound up having to edit the book after my dad passed. And I didn't expect that. My dad had AML and had to have a bone marrow transplant before COVID shut down, and we had no idea COVID was going to happen. So the poor man was stuck in the hospital, really sick, and I was unable to be with him.
Oh, no.
And I never even got to tell him that I wrote a book. Like I didn't think it was going to get published because no book gets published. And I found out 2 weeks after he passed that The Things We Keep was getting published. So I edited it with grief, like so in my heart. And while it was really hard, I cried while typing a lot. I think it made the book that much more honest, and probably why so many readers say it feels so authentic, because I was editing while also grieving.
I was going to say, I'm sure that translated into the book, and the readers are definitely picking up on that. I mean, for them to write you letters and to express how they're feeling, they had to have felt that. So yeah, I'm sure that translated, but you're touching people, and that's good. So as far as like the book, is it only about grief, or you said it's about love and relationships? Is it like any like ups and downs in there as well?
There's some ups in there. Don't worry, it's not all like heavy and sadness. But
Okay.
it's about a scientist named Serena who is studying the disease her mother is dying of, which is breast cancer. And they have a very difficult relationship. And after her mom passes, she's going through her mom's stuff, and she discovers a secret that kind of changes everything. So she kind of goes on this quest to figure out, what the secret could mean, and learns a lot about her past. So it's definitely, it's a lot. There is a lot of grief in the beginning, but then it really becomes about like forgiveness and hope and marriage. It's kind of a modern take on how, as a woman, we take on so much. We are mothers, we have jobs, we're caregivers. Then you add like grief to it, and oh my goodness, like life becomes a little difficult. So I really wanted a book that kind of showcased just the world we live in today, which is just a world of way too much.
It is a lot. It can be. Yeah. Yeah. Especially when you put that on it. It's like, yeah. And Men do a lot too. I want to give them credit. They do. Husbands do a lot too.
That's
But
true. The husband character is great in this. He's pretty polarizing. I either hear from readers that they just like hate him or they love him and then they hate Serena. So it's very interesting. I can never know, who's right, who knows. It was really important to me that, I tried to make the marriage as real as possible, especially a marriage with like a young kid and just like the things that kind of piss you off, like the child only wants to eat pancakes a very specific way and the dad doesn't understand like what's going on with the pancakes. And of course the mom's like, oh, she only eats them cut in half. Like just this
yeah,
silly,
that sounds very real.
right? Yeah, and I've gotten a lot of actually comments about like, oh my gosh, the pancakes, that's totally my life. And I'm like, perfect. Because that's what, honest, like kind of truthful relationships is what I like to write about.
Yeah, that sounds very authentic. I could totally see that. Even as you were telling the story, I'm like, yeah, I could see kids like, no, I want them to cut in a certain way. Yeah, that's funny. Awesome. Okay, so let me ask you this. The podcast is for, upcoming authors or entrepreneurs or, people who are also into business. So as far as any advice that you have, because you're now an experienced, I would say. I mean, you published your book, and I'm sure you've learned some things along the way. What advice would you give for any upcoming or aspiring authors?
I think my advice would be, especially in the world of like social media, and we can compare ourselves to so many different authors out there, is to just believe in your voice and own it. Like whoever you are, that's what you bring to the table. Like be you. There's nobody else that's you. So if you can own that and just feel comfortable with it, you don't have to worry about comparing. Whether you're on Twitter or Instagram, just do what represents you. Because I think like the more honest and authentic authors are, the more like it speaks to me as a reader. And it's the more like being an author, like the things that people respond to are always one of my most honest self.
That's true. That's true. And you see it in social media too, where people who are more authentic in themselves, they tend to get more energy from people who are following them. So that's very good advice. And yeah, focusing on yourself. Yeah. And you can get caught up on social, with looking at what others are doing and they're like, oh, they sold this many books or they're coming up with their new one. But, it's like, no, just stay in your lane and just
Exactly.
do
We're
you.
all on our own path. We all have our stories because they're ours. Nobody else could write this book because nobody else, went through my experiences. And that's okay. And that's wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. I like that, Julie. Very good. Yep. That's good advice. So, as far as any marketing that you do at your book, what do you do as far as marketing?
What don't I do? No, I'm just kidding. I try to do a balance. I have a small publisher, so I do the balance of my marketing. Anything free, I say yes to without a doubt. Social media has been amazing in that there are so many communities that love to read. There's Bookstagram, there's Book Talk on TikTok, there's Facebook book clubs that love to have authors, new authors, be a part of their groups, and that part has been really great. So I'd say, I know social media can be a kind of a dirty word, but for readers, it's actually a wonderful place. And for authors, like so many readers just support what you do and want to learn about new books that it's just amazing. So embrace it.
Yeah. So, as far as social media, what's your favorite? Are you mostly on Twitter, TikTok, Facebook? Like, which one have you found works best for you?
I started out on Twitter, and that's actually how I found my publisher. And Twitter was easy because I'm a writer. I work from home, and I tend to just tweet whatever I'm thinking. And, it can be silly, it can be thoughtful, it can be whatever. And so I gained a big following from that. And publishers definitely, they do look at that. And I do think that's a big reason why someone took a chance on me is because they're like, oh, on Twitter, I'm misplaced, comma, too. And I have about 20,000 followers. So I started on Twitter, and then when I had a book, my publisher's like, you need to be on Instagram because Bookstagram will take pictures of your book, talk about your book. And if you're not on that, you're going to, miss all that. And I'm like, oh no, like I'm not I barely smile. Like, I don't do my hair. I cannot be on Instagram. And they're like, well, do it your way. So I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. So love now Instagram, because I do get to talk a lot about my book. I share poetry. I don't necessarily show my face. I have my like one author photo where I actually have lipstick on, and I share that. And I share my dog, but mostly it's, writing and book love. And that's been easier than I expected.
Okay, well, good. And then have you tried TikTok? I've heard
Yeah, I was gonna say,
because
and
book
then
talk was
you feel
good.
it, right? The slippery slope of like,
Yeah.
oh, now that I'm on Instagram. So then I had another author write and be like, that Barnes and Noble has a table that features all the like latest books on TikTok, the ones that are trending. She's like, you have to do it. I'm like, oh, that is tantalizing. And then I read another article about like how one author's book went from like, I don't know, being off of some list 10 years later, all of a sudden just trending because of book talk. So added another platform to my list, and I was like, okay, but again, I'm going to do it my way. I'm not someone who's going to be like chatting with you on TikTok. Like, that's just not me. But I do enjoy making videos because I do a lot of videos for my freelance work. So I just do, videos about writing or my book. I show the dog and just have fun with it. I don't do like a post a day. I don't try to stress out about it. I post if I don't have a lot of deadlines. That's probably the day I'm going to make a TikTok video.
Okay. Because that can be like a lot to manage, like all the different social media and just marketing your book. Or even if it was a business, the podcast is for, any entrepreneur. So it could be any business, and it could be a lot with that. So how do you managing, the different social media sites? You got Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram. So what do you find? Do you use software to help with that? Or do you just say, this is my schedule, I'm going to do this, and then that's it?
Yeah. I mean, in my world, like client work comes first. So I write a list every day of what to do. And then when the days that I see I have a little bit of room, I make myself a client and I put, create Instagram post for you or whatever. But that's how it works in my world. It's like when it can fit, it fits. And when, if there's something going on, like an obvious promo that I'm a part of, obviously I make sure it's on my list. But other than that, that's, to me, the book is when I'm the client. And so I get to be on my own client list. But paid work comes first. And until the book's, does better than my client work, it's got to be last on the list. But it gets on there.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I like how you said you make yourself the client. That's good.
Mm-hmm. I love
Yeah.
writing for myself. And actually, that's the best part about being an author. And one of the reasons I wanted to be an author, besides having this like kind of story in my heart, I write every day for my clients who I love, but I write for other people. And the last few years, I've realized like I want to write for myself too. Like that's so important to me. So
Hmm.
being an author was just so important. So I could write for myself. I write poetry, and now I have a second book too that I'm hoping to hear some news about soon. And I do love writing for myself. I mean, a great client. So I hope that book gets published and I can do even more books in the future.
That's cool. That's cool. So let me ask you this. So I recently learned about beta readers through a podcast, and it's called Beta Reader Bits. And the host of that is Tiffany Lewis, and she does an awesome job talking about beta readers. So did you use that process when you publish your book? Did you have a beta reader or beta readers and go through the whole process of getting their feedback and taking that in? Making adjustments? Did you use an editor? Like, what was your process for writing your book?
Yeah, so for this book, definitely I had, beta readers that I knew that were other writers that I trusted. And that was really important. It was important also, not just for like, commas and whatnot, but really for like the pacing of the story. It helps to know when people get bored because you're like, okay, let me take a look at this. And it just helped me feel confident that, okay, I'm not writing a book that everyone's going to hate. So beta readers are super important. I didn't have an editor for my first book. I did get one for my second book because when I worked with the editors through my press, I realized how amazing it was. Like they would ask me questions and I was like, oh my gosh, I totally didn't think about that. Like they would think about the characters and just differently than me, which is the point, right? And it made the book that much better. So I was like, ooh, I'm going to make sure I do this like way before on the second book. So I had an editor on my second book, and that made me feel even more confident when I was submitting.
Okay, that's cool. So when they gave you the feedback, did you take everything in and make the changes, or were you like, well, I'm going to leave that piece that way because I wanted it that way? Or how did you handle that? Because that's something I learned about too by listening to other or talking with other authors, is that you get feedback or suggestions. If I can get that word out, you can get suggestions for edits, and you're not obligated to make those changes. But did you find that you were taking all of their changes or their suggestions in to make the changes? Or was it like, no, I'm going to keep it that way because I want it that way? Or like, how did you manage that?
Yeah, I think it helps that my daytime job is advertising, so I'm used to a lot of feedback, and I'm used to working with my clients to kind of figure things out. So it lets me not get my hackles up. Although saying that, like the first time you open a Word document editor and see like all the red, there's like a moment of like, that's it, I'm quitting.
Yeah,
Or
because that's your baby. That book is your baby.
yeah. But as like, I was like, okay, let's read the comments. I found it very similar as like the creative process I go through anyways. And I was really thrilled because like I said, it was like, ooh, I have a partner who's suddenly thinking about my book in unique ways. And for the most part, I think there was only one or two things that I was like, no, this sentence is amazing. We will not change it. But I wound up taking almost all their suggestions, and like it really did make my book that much better because they were so thoughtful. So editors are amazing. I am not an editor, but man, they're good.
Oh, good, good, very good. So, do you do any paid ads to also get your book out? I know you do social, but do you do any like Google ads or Amazon?
I haven't done any Amazon ads. I know like lots of authors are like into that, into the data. I just haven't done that yet. The one thing I did pay for was a BookBub ad, which is a whole nother platform, because I heard it was worth it, and it really was. I mean, I can tell you it was very obvious as soon as my BookBub deal went out that, I could see the increase in sales. So that was worth its money.
Oh, that's good. Very good. Cool. And that's called Book Bub.
Yep. And it was another one of those things where an author wrote me and said, told me this amazing thing that happened to her. And, she's like, you really need to get on it. I'm like, no, I can't. I can't even like do anything else. Don't tell me about another thing. And I think that's the cool thing about authors is you meet other ones and they all want, like, we all want each other to succeed. So we all share like what works and what doesn't behind the
Hmm.
scenes. And that I was like, I didn't expect, but it's been really great and saved me a lot of money.
That is good. Yeah, cool. Wow, Julie, this was great. Like you shared some really good info. I'm sure that the listeners are definitely going to learn something as a result. Um, so I know your book is available on Amazon, right?
Yep, and Amazon, Barnes and Noble, a lot of independent bookstores can carry it because it's on Ingram, and I love independent bookstores. So if you're one of those and listening to this, please stock my book, and I will support you. Just send me a note, and I would love to give you a shout out on Twitter, or Instagram, or wherever, because independent bookstores are like why I became an author. I would go in there and just like lightly touch the books and think one day I might be an author. So
And here you are.
here I am.
Yes, yes. So Julie, leave us your contact info.
So my website is juleebalko.com, and it's JuleeBalko. And you can get it sent to my book. I have some other writings and poetry on there. And then on Twitter, I am misplaced, 2. And then on TikTok and Instagram, I'm Julee Balko. So you can follow me there.
Awesome. And then I'll have the links to where your book can be purchased on Amazon and other places as well, so they can find that. And I have one more question. This is my final question. So, do you have any last words of wisdom that you would like to leave with the listeners today?
Well, we started it out with your affirmation, which I wrote down because I loved it, about the
Oh,
courage
cool.
to, see big dreams. And I was trying to think, do I have courage? I think it's a little bit of courage, and I think it's a little bit of just craziness. So be a little crazy, like take the risk. Dreams don't happen on their own, and you have to put yourself out there. And I think if I hadn't been a little crazy and done some social media stuff and done things that were outside my comfort zone, I definitely wouldn't be an author today.
Awesome. That's good. I like that. I like that.
Courage
I
and
think,
craziness. Yeah.
what did you say?
Courage and craziness, right?
Yes, yes. I think being out of your comfort zone helps you to grow. I really do. I've done it too. Being an entrepreneur, like you have to be. I feel like you have to be. Like, think that's a plus. You got to be comfortable with being uncomfortable at times. Not all the time, but at least be comfortable with being uncomfortable. I think that's helpful.
Definitely.
Yes, yes. All right. Well, Julie, well, thank you so much for being a guest on the Call to Action podcast. I really do appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I loved it.
Thank you. And before we come to a close, I do want to mention York Campbell, who is the creator of the Poetic Earthlings podcast. You can hear his podcast at poeticearthlings.com. When you listen to them, you will hear a familiar voice. That will be yours truly. I have done some voice work for the Poetic Earthlings podcast. It's a great team and it's a lot of fun. And yeah, I'm featured a lot, not featured, I'm included, I should say, not featured, included a lot on season 4, which is the current season that's out. So it's a really fun podcast, very science fiction. So want to mention that. And then also, I'd like to mention Tiffany C. Lewis, who is the host of the Beta Reader Bits podcast. And you can hear her podcast on betareaderbits.podbean.com. And then also, finally, remember to visit planmindfully.com to get your printable positive mindset affirmation cards. Because when you affirm something, you begin to stir the energies of the universe into action. And these cards are a tool to help you to bring positive changes into your life. And to all of the authors, the entrepreneurs, the self-starters, everyone who is doing their own thing, remember the code. The journey begins when you take the first step. Courage, optimism, determination, and enthusiasm are the tools that will help you along the way. Until next time. Thank you for joining me on this episode of the Call to Action podcast. Make sure to visit me at ctamarketing.biz. There you can find articles for entrepreneurs and self-starters on tech and tips related to navigating this ever-changing world. Until next time.